Welcome. We're back. It's another week. It's another day. It's another day to talk about nerdy things and whatever we're watching this week. Dean, hello. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm fine.
Loads to talk about in lockdown. We're just watching TV and not really doing much else.
Pretty much.
How are you? What did you what's on the menu today?
On the menu, I think we both agreed on maybe doing what is a slight Disney Plus roundup in a way, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit of a
we've
Disney
both been
Plus
checking
roundup.
out. Yeah, we've both been checking out stuff on that platform a little bit, haven't we?
Yeah. We're also not going to falter on the Amazon Prime content. It's becoming a bit of a tradition.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll do a little bit of a Disney Plus roundup. So I think we should just fire away, get into it.
Cool.
Shall we discuss whatever? What would you like to discuss first?
Let's think. So what's the biggest player on there that we've both been checking out is WandaVision, isn't it?
Oh, indeed.
Yeah, you've been enjoying that yourself and checking that out.
Indeed.
What have your thoughts been?
I did a week-to-week viewing of it as it was coming out, obviously. And then before the last episode, myself and my girlfriend did a whole rewatch, binged all 9 episodes basically just before the not quite. We watched them like the day before and then got into the last episode. Initial thoughts, I really liked it. To sum up, if you don't want to listen to the whole podcast, but please do, I thought it was one of the most inventive things Marvel have done, and I think it's due to the fact that they're such an established property now that they can really delve into their, extensive source material and pick out the weirdest stuff and make a bit of a mishmash and also bring in the elements of the cinematic universe that they've built as well and fit it and mold it to that. So I really liked it, and I thought it was quite a personal story about very real things. Some elements of the very end of just the last kind of 20 minutes or so I felt went back to kind of standard, CGI fight. But it didn't overshadow everything that came with it, and I feel the story at the end really, we'll say, came full circle, and it was just about Wanda. And we'll get into it a little bit as well. Like, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the online fan theories that were going on, and I feel that may have played with people's expectations a little bit too much. But first off, what did you think?
What did I think? I feel pretty similar to what you said there. I loved the visual side of it. I loved all the nods to sort of sitcoms over the eras and all the little references to. I mean, there was like a string of things, wasn't there? You go through all the decades. They had like I Love Lucy, and they mentioned the Dick Van Dyke Show at one stage, don't they? And Bewitched, Brady Bunch, Malcolm in the Middle. That was one that I spied as well.
Yeah. Modern Family, The Office.
Modern Family, The Office, with the camera work and stuff like that, definitely. I thought that was all really fun and really well done. I really like the way that they did that. For me, the sort of standout was, what's her name? The character, Agnes.
Catherine Hahn, Agnes,
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
She made it for me.
Yeah.
I also think that the two of them did a great job as well. Like that's the best I've seen them in those roles as
Absolutely.
a whole. Yeah, throughout that every single one of the films, like they just outshine that, I think, in those performances for the show.
Yeah,
they both did a really great job. I did find though, if I had a slight negative side, for me it was just a case of it felt occasionally some episodes felt a bit samey, and I understand. Yeah, I don't know what you felt about that, but I get the sense that you need to cover every single decade from like the 50s onwards with all the sort of references and stuff. And I understand the need to do that. But because they have to kind of like do an episode that is about a certain side of that decade in television, like I felt that some of the episodes due to that, they feel a little bit more like filler. And I wanted them to kind of get to the more interesting like revelations of like the mystery of the plot itself than to just have me again in the sitcom environment. And like once you've done that trick once, it's it's a fun trick to watch and it's great. But once you've established it in a few episodes, I didn't feel like there was the need to keep it going as much in some of them, not all of them.
I definitely felt the same. And I thought by maybe episode 4, I really wanted to move away from the sitcom and focus on Wanda's state of mind now. So just if anybody doesn't know, we probably will get into some spoilers. Just we've both finished it now. It's been out. I'm sure the vast majority of people will have seen it now if you have Disney Plus. But basically, Wanda is kind of reeling from the loss and the trauma of the movies, of whatever she went through in the films, which we didn't really focus on her all that much in the movies, and wasn't all that interested or invested in these two characters. But I knew what the potential was for this story, and there's a couple of books that I will recommend maybe in a few minutes when we get into some specifics. But I felt the sitcom was a great little idea and to make something new. But the more the show went on, I wanted to focus a bit less on it and just how Wanda is dealing with this loss, this unbelievable, like she's depressed. And I'm quite surprised the kind of themes and the things that they're kind of starting to deal with now with the Marvel shows. And I've watched the first 2 episodes of The Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I was fully expecting to just be fun, political intrigue, kind of buddy cop things. And it is that, but they're dealing with some quite heavy themes in it. And I'm quite impressed with kind of they're pushing the boundaries out a little bit. And WandaVision was the same, with dealing with depression, loss, isolation, and in a weird way, this like meta commentary on coping with a fantasy, so we throw ourselves into these fantasies as a coping mechanism. And it's exactly why I like these kinds of things, because it's the exact same thing. We all watch these things in a way to just get through the day,
I did actually call it pretty early on, to be honest with you, like when it's like maybe the second or the third episode. It did kind of twig with me that I suspected that it was about Wanda kind of using her powers to sort of make almost like a grief bubble to live in. And I kind of guessed again, like that it's probably going to be based on her experience of like the television that she might have grew up watching in Russia at the time, like the idea of like American culture coming into that culture. Because I know that was a really big thing, genuinely with a lot of people in the 80s. That they experienced a lot of American culture through the television, and that was almost worked as amazing propaganda from the American side of things to actually, like, in a way, win the Cold War without weapons, to do it through pop culture.
And that's why we're also invested in American media as well. It is cool. But there was a lot of that in it, and just to mention now some of the fan theories, get them out of the way and read online, because I like keeping up with the stuff online and seeing where things are going. And obviously I appreciate all the nods to comic storylines and all those drug-fueled 60s comics where, Scarlet Witch and Vision were going a bit crazy. But I think some people were disappointed that maybe, the character that Monica Rambeau mentions, I know this aerospace engineer, and they're dropping little hints because everybody expects Marvel to drop the hint of what's coming next. And I liked that they stayed away from that here. They just kept the show about these characters and her especially. So like, the aerospace engineer, people wanted it to be Reed Richards from the Fantastic Four, which made sense. And I'm not going to lie, in the moment that I realized he wasn't going to maybe get name dropped, I was a little disappointed, but that's completely, I would feel like it would have taken us out of the show and taken the shine away from Wanda. Or the use of Evan Peters as Quicksilver from the original X-Men films.
That was a smart nod. I liked that.
people were now were losing their minds about, right, it's totally the multiverse now it's all the same whatever, which I think they could still absolutely do, because it's leading into the next Doctor Strange film, which is Multiverse of Madness, so I think they still have that door open. But I just love that little nod. It's just a little cheeky wink to fans, that we can play with these things now. We have new toys in the playground. It's fun, But I do, from reading reactions online, people were actually quite disappointed in the finale because they didn't bring in these things. And I feel like there's an element of the kind of pop culture fandom now that just, they want to be fed what they want. Do you know what I mean? And it's the same with Star Wars, is why there's such a negative reaction to Star Wars. Now, I'll agree, those movies were not good, but I think sometimes theorizing and stuff can kind of lead people to get carried away. And I was doing it myself, And I realized week to week, and then I realized again when I went back to binge, that it was tampering my experience with the show. So when I went back to binge it and I realized, look, this is just about a character who's depressed, creating a reality for her to live in a bubble. And when the story is just about that, I liked it. So I started to get a little bored with the outside world stuff, with the guy working for Sword and I didn't care about that villain-esque person. But
I think you're blinded a bit by knowing too, like from what you've just said there. I think it's a case of, because you are so knowledgeable about the content itself, and because you have such an investment in that universe and knowing quite a lot about what's going on. From my point of view of like being somebody who like viewed it without knowing about a lot of that backstory and a lot of the history of the characters and everything involved, like I wasn't looking for those things or waiting for them. So
exactly.
I don't really sort of immerse myself in any of the fan theories or anything like that. So again, it was just like viewed pretty fresh from my eyes.
Yeah.
And the only bit that did surprise me, actually, I managed to kind of form a pretty accurate guess about the way it was going to go with Wanda's side of things. But the bit that genuinely did come as a bit of a surprise for me was when Agatha sort of revealed herself. And I don't know, I sort of preferred her character before that revelation took place.
Right,
and for me, like when things started to get a bit witchy towards the end. Yeah. I don't know, like...
It became a bit cartoony.
Yeah, a bit hokey, no pun intended. Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah, I thought the fight at the end, with Agatha and Wanda, I thought became a little cartoony, like touch and go, a little. I didn't like all of it, but I do like that fantasy stuff anyway. So I'm all on board for the witch mythology now and stuff.
I'm the same. I've got no problems with like magic stuff at all. Like I'm the same. Like I love fantasy and stuff like that. But for me, like I don't know.
Her
I kind
in
of,
particular, like
it was what you was talking about the conflicts. Like I get kind of tired with that same old depiction of like where magical depictions of things on screen where you just have like two characters shooting brightly coloured shite out of their hands at one another, and then the other person's got their brightly coloured shite heading towards them until the two balls of colours come together and merge into one big colour. And it's like, please, somebody think of a different way of depicting magic in a less tedious kind of way on screen.
I actually really liked how the conflict was resolved at the end, though. Like, so the whole process of the conflict, I got a little like bored. But then how it's resolved with her putting the runes up around the world, I thought that was quite cool, And I think they can play a lot with that. Obviously, I know what's coming next vaguely with Doctor Strange. Like Elizabeth Olsen is now going to be the co-lead in that film. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to digging into that side of things. And I'm sure that film is going to be leaning more towards the big bombastic kind of stuff that I find fun anyway. But yeah, I do. I completely agree. Is
that stuff? I was curious. Is that stuff in the comic? Is that witchy sort of aspect of it and that side of things pretty dominant in the comic? Is it? Yeah?
It's much heavier, much heavier. So there's a storyline kind of that was. What I like as well is that they take elements of different storylines and they mold it to fit what the story they're telling in the films. So like there's one storyline, House of M, it's called, which Wanda loses Vision, loses some of the Avengers. She goes crazy and she creates a new reality. But it isn't just a bubble. She changed the entire reality of like the world, and it's pretty cool. And she creates her children, and then like Professor X and Magneto, who fans were hoping would show up in the show, but I was a bit like, oh, yeah, I don't know if they should, because it'll take focus away, you know. But they have to go and kind of tell her to put the world back. And there's a very famous like quote that she has in that comic that's just no more mutants. And she gets rid of the mutant gene completely, just with this like a snap of her fingers. And Agatha Harkness is like her mentor in that book. Eventually she dies, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, they kind of, it goes much heavier into the magic-y kind of things in those kind of stuff. But I did want to mention as well, there's one book that I think you should read, and it's just called The Vision, written by Tom King. And it is about Vision, who basically creates a family for himself of androids, and he wants to be human. So he moves them to a real suburban American town, and he starts working for the CIA. And it's brilliant. And they have a little dog called Sparky, who was in the show for at least an episode anyway. And the vibe of that book is exactly the vibe of the show, and it's a fantastic book. It's very, very well written as well. It's very tragic and kind of poetic, but that's more, it was more the vibe of those books that I loved seeing on screen rather than the actual events, whereas I think some fans were looking for those actual big events, you know. They were speculating the no more mutants line would be changed to her creating the mutant gene, and that's how they bring the X-Men in, all this kind of big stuff, you know. And now retrospectively, I'm glad that they didn't go there. I'm glad that they just kept this story the way it is, you know.
Can you clarify a little bit of that for me? Because I was a bit confused by, like, I wasn't confused, but I'm just curious. There was one moment where it was a brilliant moment. It's when kind of like the illusion sort of gates are closing off and like everything's moving towards the house, and then they have a little moment together, and she's talking to him, and she says a line. So it's something about, pardon my ignorance now, sorry with this, because like I'm sure massive fans of this will listen to me and think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But it's the bit where she was mentioning about how there's a line that sort of implies that somehow he is a construction of a part of the Infinity Stone that's in her, and sort of he is the embodiment of her love and her sort of grief made flesh. Yeah, like that she created him. Like, but I was a bit uncertain about that line. I was like, what's being implied here? Like, is she
totally created him from scratch?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I was thinking was being said, but I just wasn't 100%.
But he's a construct of her, basically. He like the vision that she created was just her kind of rosy picture of him, and she does that in the books with her kids. And I think at the end there's a little post-credit scene at the end of WandaVision where seemingly her kids are trapped in a void somewhere, and she's going to try magic them out into the real world or something. I don't know.
I saw that at the end credit sequence. Yeah, I noticed that bit. So
I think that's because her kids they do actually survive in the world in the books, and they're in the Young Avengers, which is a totally new team. But so I do like that they use that kind of those source material elements to fit the story that they tell on screen, you know. But yeah, I loved going back to her origin and getting, you know, through flashbacks, not really an origin story, but definitely informing us on who this woman is, because up until now we know that she was experimented on with the Mind Stone and she got her powers and she's from Sokovia. That's all we knew, really. But I just loved learning and, you know, actually caring about this character for once, you know, because it's no secret that I'm totally invested in this universe and these movies, and even if a certain entry is fairly mediocre, I'm still gonna have a great time with it, you know. But of course I'm not blind to the shit that comes out of it, you know. But yeah, I enjoy when they really do push the boat out, and you can see it now with them taking a few more risks with things, you know? They first did it with Guardians of the Galaxy, I think, because those characters were so obscure, I didn't know them, that they can start ever so slightly pushing the boat out, you know? And I do enjoy that. But yeah, I don't know, what did you think of the kind of the last 20 minutes? Because some of it I got a little bit bored, like we were saying, with the fight and stuff. Did you think it wrapped up nicely?
Yeah, like say the fight side of it, like say I'd started to lose a bit of interest by then. But yeah, I don't know, the way it sort of closed itself off. I'm trying to remember what were the last few scenes of it, like after that point. What was
basically
going on?
like,
I watched it the other day and I still can't quite remember.
Yeah, like she lets everybody in this town go back to the way they were. We realize, you know, she's been basically mentally controlling this entire town of people, and she just kind of walks away and goes to live in the mountains somewhere for a little while and really delve into her magic, which I thought was cool. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
So I thought it was weird that they just kind of let her get away with it in the end, and that she is the ultimate villain of this story. But it's not as simple as that. So I really liked that. And I think, obviously, with, you know, things to come, I think they'll play with that. And I think, you know, she will kind of be the villain for the Doctor Strange film, which is cool. So if they full on go for that now that they've made us care about her, but she did really bad things in this show, they should go with that, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I did. I really enjoyed it. So, Dino, what else was on the menu this week?
Yeah. So to keep things Disney Plus in theme, I did watch a string of things that I was kind of just binging on, which is quite fun. Slightly cheesy, but interesting at the same time. Documentary series all about each decade. So I ended up watching one about the 80s or the 90s and then 2000s, but I'm not going to talk about them because they're totally like sort of, those are things to watch if you just want to switch your brain off, chill out and just, you know, it's that type of television. But since I'd watched those, it suggested something else to me. And this is kind of in the National Geographic side of the channel,
right?
Of the streaming service, sorry. And it was a show called Valley of the Boom, which is a 6-part docuseries, I think from 2019. And considering I've got you to watch *Halt and Catch Fire* recently enough, it's interesting that though this was made afterwards, it actually covers some pretty familiar territory with that show, but more strictly kind of based on real events in a way. It's a shame really you haven't seen this before you watch some of the seasons of the show, because it would actually provide a little bit of context into the real world history of like some of the aspects that show's influenced by actually. But the docuseries anyway, so it tells the story of the early 1990s internet boom from the perspective of 3 different sets of real life companies and individuals. So you've got the company Netscape, who are entering the the browser wars with Microsoft at the time. And then you've got the next group of people are this new start company called theglobe.com, who sort of have ambitions of a vision of the internet that sort of precurses something like the social media ideas that later companies like Facebook sort of explore.
Right.
And then the third storyline is to do with the company Pixelon, who were an online video streaming platform that was ran by this really charismatic con man. So you've got like those different threads running through, and then they're interviewing the people involved. But then what sort of made it stand out quite a lot is, despite all of that, it's made in a way where it's equally as much of a movie as it is a documentary with the reenactments, because you've got a really, really great cast involved, and they've paid as much attention to doing those reenactments as they have like the construction of the documentary itself and like the interviews as well.
Have you ever seen American Animals?
I have, yes.
Is it a little bit like Is it a little bit like that?
Yeah. There's a certain aspect of I think there's some twatty marketing term for them, or so they call them like hybrid shows or something.
Do they?
Yeah, I think they call it a hybrid documentary or something. I'm sure I read that online once. But yeah, so it's got those two sort of elements side by side. And the movie side of it kind of feels to me a lot like you're watching something like The Big Short.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so where you've kind of got, I don't know, I guess like pretty hard to grasp, dull subject matter, but it's dealt with in this really fun, entertaining kind of way. But yeah, similar to *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Yeah.
It kind of does that thing where it makes tech seem a lot sexier than it is in reality.
Yeah, definitely.
But it works really well with this though, because they kind of mix that together with interviews of the people involved, and it all balances out really nicely because of that. So you've got like a mixture of the really entertaining stuff, but you've also got these moving factual moments that sort of juxtapose that and balance it out in an interesting way. Yeah, I don't know, it's cool. The cast, you've got Steve Zahn, who is like I said, he plays this con man figure called Michael Fain, who's really weird. He's got like this odd cartoony kind of appearance with like this bleach blonde hair, and he wears a fat suit. And
Steve Zahn, the guy from, I think he was in the last Planet of the Apes film.
Yeah, he's in Out of Sight as well.
Yes.
There's like a few Steven Soderbergh films he's been in, and he stands out quite a lot. He's great.
He's cool, yeah, I like him.
Yeah, he's brilliant. Like the persona of this character that he plays, I don't know, like I say, he's really slick. He almost comes across like this sort of like evangelist of tech in a way. And he wears these really flamboyant sort of white suits and stuff, and he's really charming. But then at the same time, there's this really weird undercurrent, of like this slightly sinister side of his personality going on.
I guess a little bit like Joe in *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Yeah, actually, to take it back to that.
Salesman, but you know.
This guy's 100% a bullshit artist. He's a snake oil sort of salesman type. Yeah. But it's mad when you kind of like just see how far he manages to take that and convince people of this lie and keep it going and form a whole company around it and just get investors spending millions, like, and celebrities getting involved, like, and to the point where like he doesn't actually have a product that he can
and it's true,
he can sell. Yeah, it's mad. Like he doesn't actually have the technology that he states he has at any stage, but he manages to get all these people involved. Like it's crazy. I
must watch that now, actually.
Yeah, it's cool. I think you'll actually like the fact that there's a cast member in it that you'll know from New Girl. It's what's his name? Lamorne Morris, is it?
Oh, Lamorne Morris. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. He's brilliant. He steals it for me because he's like this fictional stockbroker character who invests in some of the companies. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, they kind of use him really playfully in the documentary as like he's a guide for the audience. So he like breaks the fourth wall and talks to the camera at times, and he kind of lets you in on things that are happening and then cuts you between scenes and stuff, and he's brilliant at it. It's so good.
I enjoy when shows do that, when they deal with concepts that maybe not everybody would be familiar with. So like, you know, in House of Cards, when they get Frank to talk to the camera, and it feels exposition-y, but it does it in a way that it brings you along. It's a very clever way to do exposition, you know, especially if you're dealing with kind of complex topics like in House of Cards. It's, you know, advanced politics and you know, stuff that maybe not everybody would know. You know, not everybody would know what a house whip is in politics, but I do now because Frank knows, you know. Yeah. But yeah, it's. I feel sometimes I'm missing that in *Halt and Catch Fire* because I don't know what it is that they're now upset about. you know? All I know is that they're upset, and I want to see how they get not upset.
That makes sense. Like with this, like the way they do those moments, like I don't know, like say it's really playfully done. I appreciate the fact that I'm sure people who are really knowledgeable about the subject matter and really know their history about tech and you know, like people who are coders and people who actually have a proper understanding of what's being spoken about on screen would probably watch some of this and sort of roll their eyes a bit and be like, oh, come on, like. But what I liked about it is it manages to really smartly take things and communicate them in a way that's still entertaining to view. Like there's one scene in it where there's this, what comes across as a pretty ridiculous sort of airsoft kind of like gun battle, like a Nerf gun battle between, so airsoft, listen to me, that'd be pretty dangerous. No, this like Nerf gun sort of battle between the programmers in a scene back and forth, and it's shot in this way that like it makes a little nod towards John Woo or something, and it's a silly moment and it's a fun moment to watch, but it's a smart moment because it's actually showing later the conflict between two members of staff with the heads of the company and how they will eventually come at loggerheads with one another later on in the plot. So dramatically it's significant, and the scene's in there for a reason. It's not just in there to imply that like the guys that make this technology will just sit around having gunfights with one another. It's not. The scene is a dramatized version of an aspect of working in those places that's completely heightened and ridiculous, but it's not, it doesn't do it for the sake of just doing it. It's actually got a purpose to the story as well. Like so it does a lot of things like that with it that I thought were really, that was a really fun way of doing something, instead of just literally just cutting to somebody being interviewed and just saying like, and then this happened and we merged with so-and-so, which would have just been boring to watch. So it
makes it a bit more dynamic. Like that's what I found with something like American Animals. It makes it dynamic so that when you have to sit down and interview someone, which could be potentially quite boring, intercut it with something a bit more creative, and you're just kind of always on your toes then with it. So yeah, sounds good. I kind of want to watch that now.
Yeah, there's quite a few little gems like that buried in the National Geographic side of Disney Plus. I've started exploring it a lot more, and some of it's hard to get hold of because it's not necessarily on the suggested side. But the minute you watch one interesting thing, it will suggest something that you would have to keyword search to find in the first place, because it's not even available. Some of them weren't even available in the overall listings on the menu screen. I had to like keyword search to find a thing that just you wouldn't be able to find it on the platform.
I like the addition of this star thing. So it's essentially what's going to be Hulu for Europe, basically, or outside of America, until we do eventually get Hulu, because I think they're going to add it. But this star edition now, I was flicking through it the other day. It's actually got some cool stuff on it, like because they own everything from Fox now, which I keep remembering what Disney own now, and there's actually quite a lot of stuff on Disney Plus that I don't realize, because off the bat I just think, they own obviously the animated films and the Disney movies, and now they own Star Wars, and now they also own Marvel, so it's going to be all that. But I would advise people to flick through the Star section, and there's some cool series and stuff on there from like Fox and whatever, and
some of their own exclusives as well, aren't there? There's one called Next or something that I saw come up, and it says that's a Star show as well, produced by them. So there's some of their own content in there as well that looks quite interesting.
So I know we were mentioning earlier that we were doing a bit of a Disney Plus wrap up, but I don't think that we can go a show without talking about an Amazon Prime property.
We can,
right?
We're incapable of that.
So what we're going to discuss now, I'm going to ask maybe just a couple of questions or something. Just so, Invincible, right? Now, if people don't know, Invincible is an adaptation of a very long comic book series written by the creator of The Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman. So I would like to know if the first 3 episodes of Invincible were good, in your opinion.
Okay.
And what do you think of the animation style? Because for me, from the trailers, I'm not a huge fan of it. So what do you think?
Okay. Yeah, I might get to that. Yeah, so what are my thoughts? I thought it was good fun, in all honesty. Yeah. So I've watched the first 3 episodes, and the voice acting is great.
Cool.
You've got, who you got in the cast? You've got J.K. Simmons, Stephen Yen, Sandra Oh, Walton Goggins, Seth Rogen. Like, it's a brilliant cast. And they all do a really good job with that side of things. And the dialogue was really fun and engaging. But what you've mentioned there, the bit that's letting it down for me a little bit is the visual style, which is clearly influenced by Japanese anime.
Yes.
And that's by no means me having an issue with that as a visual style. It's more for me that the anime falls more into the category of like the clunky kind of Saturday morning cartoons like Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Than it does the kind of artistry and attention to detail of something like Studio Ghibli.
Yeah.
Like that's possibly a hang-up of mine, but I know that those types of styles, the style of those sort of shows is very popular. But for me, they always felt like they were cutting a few corners in the animation side of things. So you end up with this sort of staggered motion and cardboard cutout type of perspective to the visuals, which that's a choice. That's a stylistic choice for some people. But to me, it feels rushed compared to, like the greats of like things like Akira and stuff like, like where real attention to detail has gone into forming the animation.
I'm willing to bet you that super fans of Invincible are also super fans of Dragon Ball Z. I'm willing to bet that it's gonna be a hit with those fans. But I agree. Kind of like I've read the first 2 books of Invincible of 12, so I'm not super far in the story yet myself. And I was gonna wait maybe to read the next few. Like they're not. It's not terribly long process to read these books. I could read, each book is 12 issues and there's 12 and there's 144 issues. So it's a 144 issue story, which sounds like a lot, but you can read an issue in about 15 minutes, we'll say, maybe 5 if there's not as much dialogue in the issue, But like so far, it's kind of a tribute to Spider-Man, Superman, standard superhero comics, but with a few twists. And like, so as far as I know, it really pushes the boat out and gets crazy later. But I'd like to know what happens in the first 3 episodes, where roughly like where it kind of finishes off, just so that I know where in the story we are, because I haven't seen the episode.
Okay, so where has it kind of ended? So it's got as far, I guess anyone listening, there's going to be spoilers, definitely. But so you've had it established that you understand that the father, who is like the Superman type of figure of the story, that he is, well, so it ends brilliantly in the first episode where he kills the rest of the kind of like the
that happens
Avengers-y
in episode
type
1.
of. It does, yeah.
Right.
So he kills the rest of the Avengers-y Justice League type of team of heroes.
Okay.
And he murders all of them at the end. So you kind of like, you're thinking like, oh shit, because he doesn't speak at all during that scene as well. So you watch that thinking like, is this the same person? Is he being controlled by something else? Is this a robot? What is this? I'm not sure. So it ends there. And then you get a bit more time with the son, establishing his friendship with the new kind of young team of superheroes who are forming themselves to kind of replace the other team. And he's discovering his powers a bit more. But then you've got this alien race that are coming in through these portals and invading.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a moment in the 3rd episode, I think, where they're fighting those, and the father goes into the portal, and there's a funny line by the mother who's sort of saying like, oh, he'll be back before breakfast kind of thing if he's fighting aliens in another dimension, like that's just a typical Tuesday or something. But then it cuts to showing him like just going berserk and just destroying like full-on genocide towards all the aliens on their planet. So it pretty much answers the questions there about like, is this just genuinely who he really is? That's pretty much answered in that scene there as well. So you're a bit like, oh fuck, okay, so Dad is a full-on psycho. Right.
So they've kind of, those first 3 episodes at least sound to me that they've covered the first book.
Right, okay.
Basically. Like it's a bit more fleshed out in the book, but yeah, that's cool. They seem to be moving quite quickly. Maybe things will kind of deviate a bit. Because I like when adaptations deviate, because then you have 2 versions of a similar story, so
it got me really, really invested like immediately. Like I'm especially, it hooked me in on that first episode totally, and then I really wanted to know what happened for the the next 2 episodes, and by the time the 3rd episode was finished, I was itching to carry on watching it, and I wish I could have just binged the whole lot. Like, I was really, really enjoying it.
I do know that Robert Kirkman is involved. Like, it's like
he is,
he has a company called Skybound, and I think they run basically they have a TV wing basically for adaptations of his stuff, and his dialogue is so snappy. And the way he constructs his stories, you finish one chapter and you just need to keep going. So
yeah,
I hope that the show is a bit like that. It's kinetic is the word I'm looking for.
Definitely, yeah. It definitely plays that way. I don't mean to kind of like annoy anybody. Like, I didn't want that first bit to come across like me sounding like I'm somebody who's not a fan of anime in general or that sort of stuff. I'm by all means I'm not really that. It's like I would have grown up years back as a kid. Like Bravo used to show a lot of the sort of manga animations. The manga studios they'd show a lot of the really sort of early stuff like Fist of the North Star and sort of Monster City and Ninja Scroll and kind of all that type of stuff. Like, I would have grown up watching that stuff, and I really enjoyed that. And I've grown up over the years, like, keeping an eye on certain aspects of Japanese animation and being a really big fan. But I wouldn't consider myself like a super fanboy of the style of it just for the sake of it, where people just consume everything that's available. And I think some of it's a bit weak, like some of it's weaker than other things. And to me, like, the visual approach of this show is making a few more nods to the stuff that for me is the weaker side of the visual style of that form of animation. And I kind of wish that if they did approach it in that way, it was done slightly differently in a stylistic sense. Like, and to me, that lets the overall thing down a little bit. But that's my hang up. Probably not. You say a lot of people are probably going to watch this and lap it up and absolutely love that style about the show. See,
the one thing that has kind of put me off watching it straight away, because I would have sat down to watch it straight away, is the visual style of it. I feel like I'm going to be a bit detached from it. But if the writing is top notch, then
don't think it matters.
I'll get over it. You know?
Yeah, I think you will, because, like I say, the writing and the voice acting and it's nice also for a Western thing to actually see an animation with some pretty shocking kind of like graphic content in it at times as well. That's like, you know, it was like, oh, I don't get to see that on TV very often, and it's refreshing to actually get that that kind of like. I don't want to say that it's like adult subject matter just because it's violence, because that's, you know, a bit silly, like gratuitous. But it's just different to see that type of thing on screen. It doesn't happen very often. It used to happen every now and again. Like in the 90s, you'd have a few shows that do that type of thing. But I guess unless you're going to watch Adult Swim or something, you're not really going to come across that type of stuff on big mainstream platforms, which is.
The book is the same as well, and I think it's why a lot of people gravitate towards the book. So Kirkman wanted to write his own superhero book without the constraints of having to write to a status quo for one of the big two. So he published the book with Image, which is obviously it's a creator owned and run publisher, so they do what they want. So the whole idea of this show is to have a superhero show with a mythology, with no strings, no hindrances, really. He obviously still works with an editor, but, you know, and it has a definitive ending, and it has changing characters and consequences and death and mature themes as well. So as I've heard, like, the book grows, like, the character grows up with the book, so the book kind of matures as you go along. Which I'm looking forward to reading. Like, the first 2 books were a lot of fun. And some great twists. He's great at peppering in twists just to keep you turning the page, you know. Like the twist with the father. It's not a major spoiler. It's just in the first book. It's kind of the ending of the first book that he kills everyone, and you're like, oh my god, was that him? Is it? And then you keep reading and you find out, wow, he's like Hitler. But yeah, there's some great if that's where kind of they've left off the first 3 episodes, there's some great scenes to come between the father and the son, and I'll give that a watch now. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I also really enjoyed that. And actually, I've just thought with it being Robert Kirkman, just to let you know, I'm still in the process of really enjoying Outcast.
Very cool.
And kind of working through that at the moment. So I know I've got that on the cards, maybe for a future episode roundup.
I had an idea for this, so whenever you're finished and whenever I'm finished with Halt and Catch Fire, there was a TV show adaptation that had 2 seasons.
I noticed, yeah.
For Outcast, and apparently it was good, but not many people watched it, so it got the axe. But I was thinking, do you want to both watch it at the same time and then do a show? We could do a show on it, because I love the book. Fun.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, we could do that. I think that'd be a cool idea.
We don't want to set ourselves up for a fall. We might enjoy it so much, but then be gutted that we don't have any more of it to watch.
Sure, look, then we'll still have things to talk about.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, I think that could be cool then for the next few weeks. We might have something to look forward to down the road then.
All right then. Well, thanks everybody for listening again. The usual, the blurb at the end, please like the show, review
homework.
the show, do your homework, pass on the show to other people. By all means, we want to get as many listeners as we can if possible. And if you're feeling really generous, you can follow the link in the description, where you can donate as well. But
give us
by
money.
all means, if you just more than that, please spread the word and give us some extra listeners to the show. If you're enjoying it, then tell somebody else about it. That's the best thing.
Follow on the
you can
interwebs, on the Spotifys, on the red circles.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.